Hi, I'm Alana Phelan, the polyamorous librarian, and I am here to talk to you about 3 books that are coming out in the next 2 weeks. I'm also here to talk to you about some fun things that are book adjacent. But first I want to show you something about my room that annoys me and has annoyed me for years. When I first toured this house and I said, ooh, I want this house, for so many reasons. This was one of the reasons. Now, you have to take into consideration, I am sitting down. See that switch? I thought that switch connected to the overhead light. I thought, ingenious. You put a switch where I can reach it when I am reading at night, so I don't have to have a bedside table taken up with a lamp on it. I don't have to have a book light. I don't have to have anything like that. Instead, I have this cool switch. It didn't do that. It turned out it did not do that. What did it do? Well, I did not know for like a year and a half. And then during a makeout session or like after it or something, I was chilling, talking to this person, and I said, wait a second, hit that switch. It turns on the floodlight in the backyard. I guess it's there in case you hear something in your backyard and you think it might be an intruder and you want to scare them. That happened. And I've had an electrician friend over and we've talked about switching the switch over. And the person was like, oh, but it's so practical. And I'm like, you're not a reader like I am, are you? Because having that switch do what I wanted to do was like the greatest thing ever. It was like I come to this house and it was saying, I'm made just for you already. The only thing I could have had otherwise is Belle's library from Beauty and the Beast, you know? Or like a hidden room that led to Belle's library from Beauty and the Beast. Yeah, okay, so I read 3 books, 2 of which come out on Tuesday, this is how you can tell I'm single. I'm not quite sure. I want to say the 15th. I was like, if it were Valentine's Day, I would know, right? The 15th, and then one of them comes out on the 22nd. So the first book that I read in the past week or so is The Thousand Eyes, which is by A.K. Larkwood and is the second book, which it turned out to be a duology. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a duology or if it was going to be a trilogy until I finished the book, until I got to about, I'm going to say 95% and felt like it was wrapping up. So I saw this book and it was really big and it had the one thing that I said I was never going to get into again, which is a big giant fantasy book where I can't pronounce anybody's name and there has to be like a pronunciation guide in the beginning. Well, I am eating my words because even though by the end of the book I could only pronounce about half the names, it was freaking amazing. Like both books all the way through, just so good. I loved this duology. It is funny as hell, which, you know, if there's one thing that all these big giant books from my childhood, these big fantasies that sort of wore me down to the point where I was kind of done with them, they were never funny Like they were like goofy sometimes, like goofy funny. But, you know, if you wanted funny, I guess there was like less big tomey books, right? You would have more of your, I suppose, I don't want to say Piers Anthony, but Piers Anthony, and you would have Terry Pratchett, who I actually didn't end up reading for a very long time, but Terry Pratchett's very funny. And you would have, I guess, Dragonlance, because you would have your humorous sidekick characters, right? But this book is just funny all the way through. And the thing about it that I've really enjoyed is that the humor I find is very younger millennial and Gen Z. So it made me feel like I was finally reading a book. Now I'm Gen X, so ish. I'm like that weird 2 or 3 years that falls into the years that Star Wars came out or whatever, and then we always get forgotten when people make charts. But like, I'm really sick of the quippy, Joss Whedon-y sense of humor that everyone, like, I appreciate it. You know, John Scalzi was saying the other day that it has its roots in, like, you know, screwball comedies of the 1940s, you know, and I'm totally on board with it. I loved it, but I'm kind of over it in these books that I'm reading now where the characters are supposed to be younger. I want to read younger authors. I want to read younger talents, and I want their humor in that. I want to see the humor of like my child who's 24 years old. I want to see that reflected, and I want to know what it looks like when they build fantasy worlds. And so I felt like the humor was not just that, but it was very, you know, queer humor, and it's very there when I talk to like my roommate and stuff about what's the, you know, we talk about like different styles of humor, or we talked about this book in particular, you know, to me, the difference of the types of humor is that there's a difference between the types of self-deprecation. You know, the way that millennial humor sort of came into like the, oh my god, just like kill me, and like can't the apocalypse come, and then they made the apocalypse come, and I blame you millennials, but like, okay, well, we're moving on. You got your toilet paper, cat food, apocalypse. Thanks. But like that humor, as you know, as younger and younger people started like dominating the internet, it's a very different kind of like, it's a very different humor from what I'm used to, and I love it. Actually, I love it a lot. What it means when younger people are actually given the chance to write like the books of their heart, and not having editors who tell them what they can do, and that they get to have their own humor, and they get to be the kind of referential that they need to be, and they get to put out books like Gideon the Ninth and this book, and they get to be funny, and they get to be queer, and that's a really lovely thing. Yeah, I really appreciate that this duology not only was wonderful, but it exists. And it's really fun. It's really like, there are some like, I screamed. So at one point I screamed, and I thought I was gonna wake my roommate up, but good news, bad news. She was already up because she actually slept so poorly that she didn't go to work, but she did hear me, and she was like, was everything okay? And I'm like, I was reading a book. And she was like, kind of a should have guessed it moment really for her. But yeah, like I was screaming like, oh my god, there were quite a few moments like that in the second book, The Thousand Eyes, the one I just read, and wow, like at a certain point I stopped updating my Goodreads because I was doing like those like percentage updates where I was like, and I was like, no, I feel like at this point I'm kind of like spoiling-ish, because I would say like, suck it. To like type all those things in. It's like, you go to hell, and you die. So I ended up saying something on Twitter about it and like pointing to the author so that people would know who the book was, and the author was like, ooh, I want to know. It's like, no spoilers, no spoilers. But it feels like it's a very interestingly built world. The world building's fantastic. Everything feels very real for a world that is, your main character is an orc. Like, oh, just wonderful. Like the gods are so cool, and the characters are so complex, and yeah, like, oh, I just loved it. I just loved it so much. And I've been struggling with books that have changes in perspective. So I would just do what I do when I love a book, but I need to take that break. I'm like, okay, book Sudoku, book Sudoku, book Sudoku, and like I would start doing like, okay, I'm gonna like see if where I can find like all the ones. Okay, back to the book. But my brain still needs that really irritating reset, and I'm hoping that by having books with multiple perspectives that have that like kind of like gripping story, which is interesting to say because there's a lot of things going on in this book where gripping might not necessarily be, I don't want to give too much away because it is a second book. But oh my gosh, so much happens in this book. It is, I don't want to use the word epic because I would be using it in the way that I don't like people using it. That was like my hill that I was gonna die on in like 2000 whatever, was that epic was, I was not gonna misuse it. But this book is like, someone standing on a rock playing guitar. Why the camera pans. I also read Bitter by Akwege Emeze, which I apologize if I got their name wrong, but I looked it up and I saw people introduce them multiple times with slight variations in pronunciation, and they didn't even flinch. So I'm not quite sure which is exactly the right one. So I read Bitter, which is the companion book to Pet. It is technically a prequel. I've seen the word companion used. I don't know if that's the official word for it. It is, however, a prequel. It is not like a direct prequel in that it is the same character. It is that character's mother and father. And so I really enjoyed this book. I actually I loved it. I think it's the best thing I've read so far by the author, which admittedly was only maybe 3 or 4 works at this point. But it was written during I want to say the summer of the first summer of the pandemic, with all of the protests, and it is very much a protest book. It takes place during protests in the city where Pet takes place, and it is referred, all the things that are referred to in Pet that lead to how everything is set in that world, come from what happens in this book. It answers a lot of questions, and at the same time does some really strong world building. It is very quick. It has the feeling of a fable almost, or a fairy, not even a fairy tale. It has all these elements. It feels like a fable. It feels like a fairy tale. You know, if you've read Pet, you know that everyone has these names that are very you know, they're all named after things, right? Bitter and aloe, and you know, they're all named after things. And so the names feel like they're very representative of everyone, and at the same time it feels very, very real. And so you have that juxtaposition of a book that feels like a fable or a fairy tale and has these fantastical elements in it, and yet the protests and the sense that Bitter has of being this teenager who is about to be an adult, who feels like she is not ready or willing to participate the way that the people around her are, and the way that the people that she is surrounded by tend to clash with some of the people who protest, and the ideologies, the clashing ideologies. These are all very real things. And in fact, you know, I mean, you could call this YA, I guess. I mean, it does feel YA, and the reason that it feels YA is because it feels very real in terms of how easy and quick love happens in this book. And unlike insta love, it feels real in the sense that teenagers do fall in love very quickly. And I think that there's a lot of hand waving done in YA. Well, you know, teenagers do fall in love very quickly, and it's blah 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 blah. But when you have characters and they feel like little dolls, and you've just, you know, made them kiss or whatever. And, you know, same thing with romance novels. If you just have little dolls and you've made them kiss, it's not worth it. When you have teenagers and they're around each other and they love each other because they see something in each other, that's not insta love. That's literally how beings work. That's literally just how quickly we can form attachments, and how quickly, you know, either we fool ourselves into forming attachments, or how quickly we actually form attachments, or how quickly both and or either and or neither. You know what I mean? This book has a lot to say, and it does it quickly but effectively. And I really, really, really loved it. I highly recommend it. Yeah. It's a lot though. You know, it's not just about racial tension. It is about tension. It's about class. It's about where we are now, and where we could be, or where we should be, or where some of this might end if we don't figure our shit out. Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. Okay. So I said I had a really good run of books. I knew what I was getting into, and I was pretty sure that I could just knock this one out because it was a rom-com, and it was Ashley Herring Blake, who I've read before, writing middle grade and YA, and this is her adult debut. And I was like, okay, cool. It's either this or a book called Manhunt, which is supposed to be a very grisly book. And while I am looking forward to it, I have been sick, as I said, and that does come with a bit of a rolling stomach, and I wasn't sure if I could handle that. Let me just knock this book out really fast. I did knock the book out fast. And I am not here to trash it, because I actually don't think it's trash worthy. That is not what that's not why I'm here, and it's not why I'm like making all these pauses. It is tough to switch. I mean, she made it look really easy going from YA to middle grade, but she has a particular talent. And her talent is writing these stories about people who are in these kind of broken places and making people feel and cry. And she tries really hard to lean into the rom-com part of this book. And it's a little repetitive. It's a little, it's fine. But the part where the book shines is when they're dealing with their shit. And I really feel like this book would have been so much better if she had just let it be about the damage, because that's where the book really hit me in the heart. All the romantic things and the sex scenes, they're all great, but you have to get to them. And honestly, like, that's fine. First time writing in this, it is not easy to write a romance despite what anyone makes you, like, people who can write really good romance, it's because they have a talent. Romance is actually not easy. It looks easy. When people do it well, it looks really easy. I mean, this book has like 4 tropes in the first, like, I don't know, third. And I think at one point I updated my Goodreads with, oops, all tropes. And it feels like too much. There are things that are going on that are really, really interesting. Like, the whole premise is that Delilah is home to photograph her stepsister's wedding, and she is sort of into the maid of honor, but there's this whole thing where, like, she remembers all of her childhood and being incredibly lonely because her stepsister and her stepsister's 2 best friends shut her out. And there's a lot of trauma there, and she starts acting out and being very bratty. And I feel like this actually sounds great, right? Like, it sounds like a great book. The only things I loved about it were, like, the sex scenes, which is hilarious because I'm so used to skimming sex scenes because I don't give a shit about, straight people going at it for the 40,000th time in my life as I'm reading another romance novel. And the emotional shit, them dealing with the actual trauma, which made the book interesting. There were a couple other things that I thought were really cool too, but, like, they were mostly set up for the next book, like, more trauma. And I'm like, well, maybe it's just, like, not romance, but, like, I've seen romance deal with, like, big heavy issues and still have moments of fun and adorableness and whatever. And I want that. I want that in my romance. The point is that I want to see people who are dealing with their shit. That's what I want. I want to see, people in books who are dealing with their shit, and that's what draws me to romance. And they were only doing that at the very, very end of the book, instead of really sort of getting there to me. The other thing that really bothered me about this book is that they kept saying women and NBs. As a person who's run events, it's a really loaded phrase in the queer community. And when you talk about it in terms of who you date, it's a really loaded phrase. And because you never see her actually date anybody else, but people who use she, her pronouns, who, it's really loaded, and I wish that they had just said that, you know, she just dates women, or she's whatever they wanted to do. But like, I really wish that someone in there had, someone she had dated used they them pronouns, or something, just literally anything, because when you use that phrase in a book, and you don't back it up with something on the page, it just comes off as women and women light, and it really I know that might be me bringing my own personal shit to it, but I actually asked a couple people, a gender non-conforming person and a non-binary person, and they were both like, yeah, no, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have put that in that book. Okay. Do I like the book? It was fine. I will read the next one. I liked it. Am I picking it apart like I do when I like things? Just fine. Yes. Is it because I think she has nowhere to go but up because she's changing genres? Yes. Did I just have a few things that I just wasn't into? Yes, that's it. That's it. Did not hate the book. Loved a lot of it. Also had a child at 19. My life did not go like that. Claire was extremely privileged. She was so lucky. But yes, her feelings are valid and her experiences are all valid, but like, wow. Wow. Okay, I want to tell you about a couple other book-related things before I go. This is an incredibly uncomfortable place to do this from. I really need to get like a setup. So I'm a fool. So remember that time that I got that free book? So I went to clean up, because sometimes we'll do like a mail pile of like boxes and things in case we need to ship anything out or whatever. And the envelope from the last mail batch was still in there. Thank goodness, because there was a necklace inside there. Oh, I don't know if it can focus on that. From Stephanie Rabig. Am I not ridiculous? Well, it was because I had to open it one-handed because I was holding the iPad. So I got a beautiful necklace. Thank you, Stephanie. Very silly of me to... Well, I'm glad that I checked it before I threw it out. Okay. The other thing that is book-related that I got was also like a present. So my kid pre-bought my Christmas and birthday presents this year because there is a makeup company called Revolution, I guess, and they put out these 2 makeup palettes with DC. This is Mad Love, Harley Quinn, Joker, and it comes with these colors. And then, so that would be like birthday. And then this is Christmas, Dangerous Love, and those colors. So I'm really excited because when you open up this one, there's little bat symbols on the shadows. Very, very cool. And yeah, so these are my presents from my kid. Love it. And so yeah, you know, book related, book tangential. All right, so when next we speak, I will probably have read Manhunt. It is supposed to be graphic. So I watched oh my God, it's stable camera. Well, it's mostly stable camera. I'm so happy. The pilot to Hannibal. I'd never seen it before, and I thought that maybe if I could handle that, I would like prepare myself. I I didn't know how grisly or not the show would be, but I was like, it's not like I'm gonna like pay money to watch the new Dexter yet. I'm like waiting for my best friend to catch up, and he never will, so. So I thought I would watch the first Hannibal and see if it had audio description. It does not. And if it had a stable camera, which it does. So I'm gonna try to read Manhunt. I think there's something else that comes out next week. Not next week, week after next. And yeah, so those are my goals for the next 2 weeks. And then I have some book club books I need to read, which include Jacqueline Woodson's Another Brooklyn, and probably some Nick Stone. And yeah, my book club's doing, women of color. So I have, and I haven't been doing really well with like short story collections, but I have like a Asian American collection. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to go, but I'm looking forward to all those things. I'm looking forward to March. Oh, I have, you know what it is? I think the other thing I have on my queue, well, my scheduled list, is to read M.K. England's next book, which is under the name Remy K. England. So I have a lot to look forward to, and hopefully you do too. I'm going to do the like and subscribe thing. I have never said it before, but I like it when you do that. So I'm going to ask you to do it. And oh, I did cut my hair because I couldn't stand looking at how dead and terrible and miserable and bleachy and messy it was. And I did re-dye it, and it's already like almost all completely come out of the top. So it turned out that it wasn't because I put it in for 15 minutes. It just does not want to hold the dye. The new stuff that's growing in is getting long enough to curl. But this stuff is like, we don't curl. We have too much dye and bleach in us. We just lie there. This is as like curly as it wants to get. So I don't know what to do. Oh, this is this curly because when it was wet, I braided it. Oh, and I tried to do a smoky eye for the first time. I don't know if I did. And also, all that stuff that looks like eyeliner is legitimately just the black shadow fallen down. Yes, I'm talented. I don't know. I just left it there. Does it look like shadow? Does it look like I did a thing? Who knows? I watched a tutorial today, but I didn't follow along or anything. I waited several hours, ate some cookies, made some tater tots, ate some tater tots, and then did the thing from memory. So who knows? Hannibal was good though.